Maybe I'm getting old, but remember when your favorite pop song had this instrumental solo section to it where somebody would take a solo and it was a guitar or a keyboard or a saxophone, and that solo was so great and just as important to the song. We could sing every note to that solo. A great solo was a part of a great pop song. I was wondering what happened to the great solos recently and thinking about jazz solos that appear in pop song. Because believe it or not, some artists and producers over the years have chosen to bring in iconic jazz musicians to play amazing solos as a part of pop songs that most of us know and love. So today I want to explore the top 10 jazz solos that appear in pop songs. But before we get started, I wanted to make sure that we had a few criteria that we could follow so that we're not covering too wide of a swath when it comes to these solos. Number one, it's got to be a featured instrumental solo. It's a solo that's standing on its own. Everything else in the music is supporting the soloist, including the vocals. No playing behind the singing of a vocalist. Just a featured instrumental solo. Number two, the solo's got to be improvised and not just a recapitulation of melodic content we've heard earlier. It's got to be an improvised solo, preferably with some harmonic content that we've already heard in the song. Number three, for practical purposes, we're going to stick with studio recordings. There are so many wonderful live versions of things out there. I'm sure you can find them on YouTube, but we're going to stick with some iconic studio recordings that have amazing jazz solos on them. Here's my 10. Maybe you've heard number 10 in an elevator or a dentist's office. That doesn't make it any less great. This is, in my opinion, one of the great instrumental solos, and it comes from the Little River Band and their 1978 album, Sleeper Catcher. That's right, it's reminiscing, and it's a flugelhorn solo, not a trumpet solo. This flugelhorn solo was played by an iconic trumpet player in Australia named Bob Vanier. Bob's credits include Christine Sullivan, the pop group Split Enz, and the fusion group Pyramid. All it takes is about 2 bars to understand that Bob's improvisation is heavily informed by jazz melodicism and jazz phrasing. I've always loved this solo. Number 9's offering comes from the 1974 eponymous debut album by singer-songwriter Phoebe Snow. Maybe you've heard me mention her on the channel before. I love her music, and for this track, Harpo's Blues, she was able to pair 2 of the most legendary jazz musicians of all time. First of all is the great Zoot Sims on tenor saxophone. Now he doesn't play a solo per se, he's kind of playing behind Phoebe while she's singing, and it's still magical.
My hour upon the stage.
The real solo happens by the great pianist Teddy Wilson. That's right, the great Teddy, I helped break the color line in jazz music, Wilson. Teddy Wilson was one of the first African-American musicians to work publicly with a white jazz musician, that being Benny Goodman. He's as important as he is great on the piano, and this is a beautiful solo. Number 8 comes to us from 1981, and one of the biggest groups in the entire world, the Rolling Stones. On their Tattoo You album, they recorded a song called Waiting on a Friend, featuring a tenor saxophone solo by one of the giants of jazz, the great Sonny Rollins. Now, in Sonny's words, he really didn't want to take part in this session. My wife Lucille was the one that persuaded me to do that recording. I said, man, the Rolling Stones, I don't want to do any record with the Rolling Stones. I'd considered them, and it's faulty, not on the level of jazz. But my wife said, no, you must do it. So I said, okay, let me see if I can relate to what they are doing. Let me see if I can make it sound as good as possible. Well, I think this was a marriage made in heaven, because not only is this a great song, this is a great solo that makes a great song even better. Number 7 comes to us from another iconic jazz tenor saxophonist, Grover Washington Jr. Now, by the time he had this hit, he had already recorded many popular songs, including the great Mr. Magic. But when he recorded the album Wine Light in 1980, someone suggested pairing him with the great vocalist Bill Withers, and the resulting collaboration produced the song Just the Two of Us, an amazing song in which Grover takes a great solo on. This song became so popular that in 1981 it reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. This is an example of a jazz song becoming a popular song. The song at our number 6 is actually where I got the idea for the list. Huey Lewis and the News was one of the biggest, most iconic bands of the 1980s, with hits like I Want a New Drug and Stuck With You. Everybody in the 80s was singing along with Huey Lewis songs. Their 1988 album, Small World, featured collaborations with the Tower Power Horn Section, Bruce Hornsby, and even members of the San Francisco 49ers football team. Unfortunately, it didn't approach being as successful as the two albums before it, Sports and 4. Frankly, it's an album that not a lot of people know about. If you stumble on this record, you'll see that buried in the middle of the album is a track called Small World Part 2 that features an unbelievable tenor saxophone solo by the late great Stan Getz. Not a lot of people know about this incredible solo on this record. Huey Lewis and Stan Getz had met at a Zoot Sims memorial, where Getz promptly let Huey know that I can play on that too. Apparently he really could. The Branford Marsalis and Sting collaboration has produced so much great music throughout the years. I was lucky enough to really be growing up and discovering music during the Blue Turtles era, and I remember how excited everybody was to hear this amazing music that Sting was putting together with these new cats and these new sounds that they were all discovering. I could have chosen so many great solos from this time, my personal favorites being a couple from Bring On the Night, Burn For You and Driven to Tears. But since that's pretty much a live recording, I'm going to pick Englishman in New York from Sting's 1987 album, Nothing Like the Sun. Now, this is one of those moments where they take a straight ahead jazz section and it seems like they're trying to really shoehorn it into the middle of the song, but for some reason it works perfectly, and Branford, he's just genius, as usual. Now, let me say this whole list could have just been solos by Michael Brecker. He played some of the most iconic solos on pop songs from the 70s through the 90s by people like Chaka Khan and Paul Simon and Anne Murray. He was the king of playing like 8 bars that sounded fantastic and would include something that was like physically impossible to play. In my opinion, Candy from Cameo's 1986 album Word Up was hands down his finest moment. In just 16 bars and over just 3 chords, he lays down the funkiest, slickest, most signature-laden, incredible solo you'll probably hear ever on any pop record. Number 3 is all about Stevie. Stevie Wonder is no stranger to having brilliant cameos on his incredible records. One of my favorite cameos happens in 1982's Do I Do, where he features the great Dizzy Gillespie taking a solo on one of his songs. But my favorite collaboration, and I think the greatest, is from the brilliant Songs in the Key of Life album from 1977. Over 100 people helped put this album together, but on side 4 is an amazing solo on the Fender Rhodes by the great Herbie Hancock on the song As. What could have been just a cameo on this record turns into a full-blown keyboard solo, and Herbie just kills it. Song number 2 features a Billy Joel song from the 70s, but before we talk about that Billy Joel song from the 70s, there's another Billy Joel song from the 70s that came after, in 1978, a song called Zanzibar that's worth mentioning because Billy Joel featured the great Freddie Hubbard, who plays 2 trumpet solos on this cut. But the song in this spot is the one that most of us are familiar with. Just the Way You Are from 1976, featuring the great Phil Woods on alto saxophone. Now, this is a great solo for sure. He is speaking jazz language from beginning to end, but when everybody can sing a great solo like this, it's on a whole other level. A 16-measure bebop solo at that. If you go to see Billy Joel tomorrow, his saxophone player is going to play 95% of this solo. It's so iconic. And you can thank Phil Woods for your grandma singing sharp 11s. Steely Dan made a business of having great instrumental solos in their songs. Whether we're talking about Phil Woods on Dr. Wu from 1975, or Larry Carlton on Kid Charlemagne in 1976. For pop songs, these solos are way above the line, but when we talk about 1977's Asia, we're talking the best of the best. The title track on this album gives us the finest twofer you'll ever find on a pop recording. The great saxophonist Wayne Shorter, at the time a member of the fusion group Weather Report, plays a brilliant solo over the striking modal section in the middle of the tune. And the great drummer, Steve Gadd, plays an amazing solo over that same section as the song is fading out. This is high-level pop music made genius by 2 legendary musicians improvising over it. And it is, hands down, my all-time favorite. So that's my list, and I'm sticking to it. What's your favorite jazz solo on a pop tune? Did I leave it out? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what it is. You know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself, and please love your neighbor.